Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here, participating in this event. We very much appreciate your participation. The first candidate that's going to speak is going to be Gary. We're going to go in reverse order of what we did. Steve. We're going to go in reverse order of the Saturday meeting. So, Steve, the microphone's yours.
I've only been on the board a year, so I guess it takes a while for names. I'm Steve Cook. I've been on the board about a year. I've been the president since last September. Saturday morning, I was the only one who held a microphone like this. I'm a lot more comfortable. It goes back to my days when I played blues harmonica, and you got to have the microphone right up to your mouth. I'm retired, so don't ask for a performance, but I'm still going to hold the microphone. Thank you for coming. I've been honored to be on the board for the past about 12 months. I'm going to start tonight with a little story, and then I'll kind of go on into some thoughts I have that kind of come out of that story. And the story actually was first told to me kind of third hand, and I didn't believe it. And then it actually essentially happened to me. And as my version, or as my experience, I really should say, comes, is that I was down in Houston for a social event. My wife and I still spend a good amount of socializing time down there with former colleagues and people I have worked with in the past and the like. And as you do in a social event, you start talking to people and you start talking to friends of friends, and they, as you do, you say, well, where do you live? Where do you live? And somebody said, and I said, we live in Bentwater. And the response was kind of like a blank look, and why would you live there? And I was shocked. This is the best place ever to live in my experience. And it turns out, to make a long story short, they had knowledge of some public social media sites that were less than positive about the Bentwater living experience. I quickly corrected them, and they and their friends have a different view of Bentwater now. And I committed when I started on the board that I had no preconceived notions. I didn't have an idea what needed to be worked on, where my skills or my experience might be useful, but I would use them to focus on the positive. To state it another way, I have always felt like my Bentwater glass is half or perhaps even 2/3 full of all the good things we've got by living here. And if we can make it go from 2/3 to 7/8 to 99% to 100%, that's what we're here for, and that's what we all want. Are we surrounded by perfection? No. I mean, nobody's surrounded by perfection. But there are things that can and have been done to improve our quality of life. Those of you who have attended our open meetings and our special meetings know of the board, know some of the steps that have been the positive steps that have been made by the POA staff and by the board in saving money. We don't expect to live here for free, but that doesn't mean the cost should always be going up. Examples are, easy to come by. I'll just mention a couple that probably most of you heard or read about in Bentwater Life, the From Your Board articles, or the POA emails that go out, the financial records, and the meetings that we've had. We have the electronic gate access. It took a while to get that up and running. There were some starts and some stops, but the bottom line, it works very efficiently now, and that saved us essentially a man-year of time of an employee that we had formerly at that front gate. Under developer control, there was never any effort made by the POA to collect fees from our neighbors who weren't paying their fees. We all pay our fees. Why shouldn't the rest of them? There's been a lot of work led by Jim Hostetler and others in the POA staff in going after our neighbors that have not been dedicated enough to living in Bentwater to pay their bills. Roughly a third of those people are now paid up, and we've collected over $100,000. We continue that effort, and that effort will continue to be a benefit to all the rest of us. One of the things we've also learned as a board, and this, again, going back to the developer-controlled board, you know, he had his own business. The developer had his own business, and he ran the POA as part of his business, and he had the right to run it the way he did. And under his control, and again, it's his business, and business people have the right to run businesses the way they want. But under his business management, the people of the POA staff were micromanaged to the point where they really weren't solicited to find improvements that would be to the benefit of all of us. We have learned that Robert and his staff are very good, and if we let them get on with their business, they find ways of saving things, saving time, saving money. There's a lot of other things I could say. One question that comes up is, why doesn't the board talk more about the details of its discussions and the like? And we have a code of ethics and a code of conduct. And the fact of the matter is, a board of trustees or a board of directors of any organization is essentially hired by the members to do their business for them, and the public records that are available thereafter, when they become public records, are available. But we don't talk about whether I agree with this, that, or the other decision. Once the board makes a decision, it's all of our decision, and you'll certainly never hear me say differently. This is, in a lot of ways, being on the board is an easy job. In some ways, it's a difficult job. On one hand, we all have kind of the same ideas in mind. We want Bentwater to be a better place to live. But let's think about our neighborhood. We have 2,790 lot owners. Call it 2,800 for easy numbers. In a typical month, we'll get emails or social media comments from about 1%, 25 to 30, that want this to be done differently, that to be done differently, or whatever. We might get about the same percentage, 25 to 30 in that 1 month, that are happy with whatever happened to them. In that 1 month, we'll get about 10%, somewhere between 250 and 350, again, call it 280 for round figures, that come into our office and need help from our staff, and they get the help from their staff. So add a few more percentage here and there. We talk about 15% of the people we have direct contact in a typical period of time. I've been talking about a month, but you pick your period of time. That means we hear from 420 people in a typical month, and there's 2,380 we don't hear from. Whoever you hire, whoever you elect to be on this board, has to be thinking about the 420 and the 2,380, because we represent the entire 2,790 lot owners of Bentwater. This board that I've been on, and if you elect me, that I will continue to work for your benefit on, has always thought about the entire population of Bentwater. That means that there's some things that I wouldn't do if I was king. And that means there were some things that you wouldn't do if you were king or queen either. But that is what the role of a board of directors is, or a board of trustees is, of an organization like this. As I said at the beginning, regardless of what the subject matter is, I will always help work for the benefit and the improvement of Bentwater. You will never hear me say publicly negative things about this community, because I am firmly convinced that it is the best place any of us could imagine living today. Thank you. I'll take a couple questions. I think I have 1 minute for a question.
Okay. If you have a question, ask that you give your name and speak into the microphone, because this is recorded.
My name's Elizabeth Woods, and this question is obviously for Steve. Some property owners who live close to the west gate would like that gate to be open longer, particularly on the weekends. Now, I understand that the deed sort of forbids it being opened, and my question is, among your conversations with the developer, have you visited with them to ask if they would consider allowing the gate to be opened unmanned, which would certainly be more cost-effective than adding staff to allow the gate to be open longer?
I have not had that personal conversation. I am very certain that nobody on the board or of the staff have asked him, at least in recent days, if that gate could be opened unmanned, because that really goes against the concept of what Bentwater was sold to all of us as being, and that was being a gated access community at all times. There were significant discussions in the past with the developer, the Bentwater or the North Shore, as most of you know, abbreviated BOTNS. That's my 1 minute. I mean, that's my 0 minute call. So I'll be real quick about the extent to which further expansions of the opening of the West Gate might be possible in the past. He wasn't amenable. It's something the board has, in response to prior questions to us, have been discussing. It's not a closed subject, but it is not a decision to go forward in that direction. It's certainly not been done yet.
Thanks, Steve. Next will be Chris Howell.
Well, first off, good evening. Thank you guys for being here. Whether we're sitting up here or sitting out here in the audience, everybody is here because of the participation within our community, which is vital for the interest of our community and for the progression of it as we go into the future. Little story, I was pretty adamant that I did not want to run for the Board of Trustees. I'm fairly new here in the community. Seeing the social media sites and everything that goes on, you know, somebody would probably think that we're all crazy sitting up here for running for this position. But as I was asked and approached about it, people thought that maybe I could offer a fresh, young perspective. I'm a single father, so I have full custody of my 2.5-year-old daughter. So things like that are important to me when I look at the amenities around the community and the things that we have to do for children. Unfortunately, our community is lacking in regards to those things. We've got a lot of outdated play equipment and only one spot for the kids to really play. So I saw a thing on Facebook, believe it or not, and it said, be the change that, or see the change that you want to be, or something along those lines. And I thought, you know what, if I want to make a change in this regard and help progress Bentwater into the future to be a family-friendly neighborhood, then I need to be that change, and I need to stand up here and be willing to take the bullets and the criticism and everything else that goes with it in order to better our community. So that's why I'm here this evening. What I'd really like to do, I think that this job, if you would call it that, is that of a public servant. We are here to represent the whole 2,800 people in this community, rounded up, as Steve said, and that's our job. So I think the best way to do that is to interact with everybody here and field the questions that you have, tell you kind of a little bit about what my vision is for Bentwater and what experience that I think that I can bring to the table. Like I touched on a brief amount, that really the youth and the perspective of the younger families. When you look at Montgomery County, the average age in Montgomery County is 36.9 years old. That tells us that a lot of younger families are moving up here. A lot of amenities are coming in. We've got Margaritaville that just bought out La Torreta del Lago. A lot of communities like the Woodland Hills and Howard Hughes Development Corporation has invested hundreds of millions of dollars into that neighborhood because they know that families are moving up here. I think for Bentwater, we've got to have a lot of foresight, and we've got to be able to see what those trends are, and we've got to be able to increase our POA-controlled amenities. So that's one of the things that I'd really like to focus on a little bit if I do get elected to be your trustee, is looking forward to the future. What can we do? Because our job is basically enhance, maintain, and preserve the property values here. The key one of those being enhance. I mean, every one of us buys our home with the idea that it's probably going to be an appreciating asset, not something that depreciates. When you live in a community that doesn't start thinking of the future and being very proactive and building the things that are going to attract new people into our community, then all of our property values are going to depreciate, and I'm certain that none of us want that. So right now, I'd like to just open it up to questions. Yes, ma'am. Oh, we got to wait for the mic. I'm sorry.
My name is Lisa Kearns, and I understand from reading your biography you moved here from April Sound.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
Can you talk a little bit about the transition from April Sound to Bentwater? What made you decide to come here?
Sure.
Being a young family.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if I'm being completely honest, April Sound had more kid-friendly amenities. There was quite a few more parks. For me, when I first started looking here, I told my realtor that I did not want to move into Bentwater because, like Steve said, I had heard some really bad things about it. My realtor, fortunately, convinced me to come look at here, and the second I drove in that main gate, it felt like home. So And like I was telling everybody on Saturday, no matter how my day at work was, when I drive into this community, everything just slips away between the overhanging trees and just how scenic it is. So for me, that was a big deal. I knew that we didn't have a lot of children-friendly amenities here, but at the same time, I did feel that this community was positioning themselves to be a leader going forward in that, and I've got a lot of faith in that. So April Sound, not a bad community at all. Lot of mix of different demographics in there, a lot of various age ranges, and a lot of different amenities. Bentwater, for me, felt like home. And if I'm being completely honest, my 2-year-old daughter chose our home. So she walked in and started screaming, and I knew it was the one. So, yes, ma'am.
I'm Holly Powers. I'd like to know what you think could be added here that would make it more family friendly.
Sure.
I heard you say there's one functioning playground with some outdated equipment. What would you be like? What would make it more family friendly?
I mean, honestly, I think a start is just replacing the playground equipment and updating it. A shade structure is going to be really crucial. I've already gotten plans that I went out and looked for a contractor myself that does commercial playground equipment and brought him to Meadows Park and said, what can we do to make this better for the kids? The playground equipment's outdated. It's been there probably 15 or more years, if I were to guess, maybe even longer. So, shade structure, updating the playground equipment, resurfacing the basketball court, things like that, we have to work within the limitations of what we have. I think going into the future, I think that there's a couple different areas, whether it be over off of West Pines or behind the POA office, that we can have park amenities, walking trails, things like that. I think that we've got a beautiful scenic area here. Walking trails would be great. It doesn't necessarily have to be functional things like playground equipment, but I do think what we have existing is an amenity that everybody already has and bought into, and we at a minimum need to maintain and enhance that. Yes, ma'am. I think I've only got about 3 minutes.
Okay, it's Elizabeth Woods again, and I'm going to ask this question to a couple of you probably, because I only got so many written down questions. Do you think that the POA should utilize technology better in order to provide information to the property owners? And I'm talking about things like the line item budget, keeping our election returns and election information up longer, minutes that are more detailed and give us information about contracts, what was approved by who, how much. That's it in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we need to use readily available technology. I think I'm a member of Bentwater Moms, so y'all can laugh at that. But, we talked about that with some of the younger families, and they don't want to come in here into the meetings. They would rather, they ask, is there a way that they can Facebook Live it, or can they do different things? So, I mean, I think technology is important to increase the communication within the community. Absolutely. I mean, I know that I searched for a couple answers looking through board minutes, and I didn't find them. I was told that they were discussed, but I didn't find them in board minutes. So I think that, when that becomes the record for us property owners to be able to know what's happening with our board, I absolutely agree that that needs to be far more detailed, and we need to bring in better technologies in order to record that and have better access. So.
Yes, my name is Wayne Camp. Do you have an opinion about the lack of diversity of the board candidates?
By lack of diversity, no, I mean, these are all people that volunteered for this position, and it's a position that anybody within the community could volunteer for. So, no, I don't necessarily have an opinion about the lack of diversity of it. I think that what I can bring is a little bit younger of a perspective, that maybe some of these gentlemen, they probably all have grandchildren and things like that, but I live it day to day, so I can kind of get a better perspective as to what the trends are for the younger generation. I don't necessarily think that the lack of diversity is a bad thing, because we've got some extremely intelligent people sitting up here, as we do throughout the whole community. So I think collectively we all bring together a better package for the betterment of the community.
Thank you. We're very diverse. We got 2 bald guys. Speak for yourself.
Patty, you had a question?
This is Patty Santowski. I just want to address that question because I think that's a lot of concern for a lot of folks, but there's all different kinds of diversity, and I think we've got a lot of diversity of thought up there, and we have some age diversity. So we have diversity, we just don't have a woman up there.
Any other questions? We got a minute and a half.
Nobody wants that, trust me.
Well, I'm sure everybody's ready to get on board, so I'll take my seat if no one else has any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question on your diversity point. We had a woman on our board originally. Unfortunately, she had a family, she had a business, and she could not find the time to really spend that she really wanted and expected to spend on the board. She came in and had a discussion, a lot of tears all around the table. There was a lot of hugs. We're sorry to see her gone. We miss her today. And I fully expected there'd be two women that would run for the board this time, and they didn't. I don't know what reason, but rumor was there were at least two that were seriously interested. And I was hoping they would. Another point about what Steve commented on, a lot of stuff that we do in the various workshops that we hold, and hold your question, I'll get to it. There's an old story about a lot of people like sausage, but nobody should see how it's made. That's kind of the way our workshops are. Not something that really should be done in open public, because I don't think we'd really get the same discussion and conversation if we cut that off. Okay, fellow property owners, my name is Jim Hostetler. Thank you for coming tonight. I wish you'd been here Saturday. I remind you that there's a very good video out there that I'd like you to look at, particularly my remarks. It's been my privilege to serve you as a trustee for 2 years, and I'm asking you to help me keep the momentum going because we've done a lot of good things in the last 26 months. My remarks tonight will really pick up from where I'm left off on Saturday morning. All the more reason to please look at the video. I'm going to talk about my qualifications. I'm not really the kind of person to blow your own horn, but I got to tell you, there's some experience here that in all of us that you need to be aware of, and so I'm going to try to elucidate a bit on that. I've been a POA volunteer for 5 years. I started getting active in early 2015. I'm a member of the national and local chapters of the Community Association Institute at my own expense. This gives me access to their libraries, research, discussion boards, and their best practices, and I make good use of that. I'm a thought leader on the board. For example, I led the original search for a reserve planning specialist to come in and study our neighborhood and give us a comprehensive inventory of all the POA assets with projected remaining useful lives and the cost of replacing those out over a 30-year horizon. I led the committee to find an alternative to the onerous community management contract that we inherited from the developer-controlled board that ultimately reduced POA expenses by over $150,000 in the first full year. I developed a reserve policy. The policy provides guidelines on how our reserve funds are to be spent and not spent. We'll vote on that policy tomorrow night, and I hope you'll show up for tomorrow night's quarterly meeting because there's going to be a lot of good information that you'll be surprised at. I initiated a cybersecurity assessment project to protect property owner non-public information earlier this year. We're addressing the day-to-day risk avoidance, insurance coverage, and a survey of all of our service providers to assess their risk exposure and prevention techniques. I insisted on our attorney producing a progress report on the collection of delinquent accounts. There was lots of activity, but no real progress reporting. Well, that's a hallmark of a service contract management philosophy, is you got to have some feedback on exactly what kind of progress is being made for the money you're spending. The POA gets great input from volunteers. There were 21 different individuals who worked on committees last year for the benefit of the Property Owner Association. Committees are great incubators for the development of future board members. I involve property owners through volunteer committees. For example, The three committees that I formed, first one was the Finance and Budget Committee to help draft proper footnotes to explain the changes that the POA was going through, and as we corrected errors introduced by the developer-led board and his auditor. That committee is also staffed by a former head of auditing for Deloitte & Touche here in Houston, so not an insignificant set of skills. I developed the IT committee to validate the support of the desktop and laptop solutions that we need for operation of the POA. And I invited Alpha Dual to join that IT committee, but that was about 1.5 years ago, and he didn't have the time as he was just starting his consulting business. The Cybersecurity Committee that I initiated, I've already talked about, but it's coming to fruition, and we had a meeting on that as well today. I was elected by the trustees to hold 2 offices on the current board. As board secretary, I've significantly enhanced and expedited the production of minutes of quarterly and special meetings. Property owners no longer need to wait the 3 months for the minutes to be approved at a future meeting, as we develop, approve, and publish, usually within 3 days of the meetings. The board also elected me to be the board treasurer. And I've improved the production of the annual audit from 6 months, or whenever, to 4 months after the close of the fiscal year. This is now an orderly process with committed dates that combine the staff preparation, the auditor's field work, the finance committee, and the cooperation required to fit the demands of the auditor's other clients. We're not his only client, so we don't get to be first in line. At quarterly meetings, I deliver insightful presentations on the financial condition of the POA, rather than just reading the balance sheet, as was done by the previous administration. I'm open-minded, I'm resourceful, I'm honest, and I'm dedicated to the purpose and the mission of the Bentwater Property Owner Association. I have the time available to spend to meet the community's needs. I'm asking the property owners to help this board maintain the continuity and momentum that we've achieved over the last 26 months. My 3 objectives for my next term are spelled out in Saturday's video, another reason to go look at it. They are, number 1, process improvement, to find further economies in the performance of our staff. Our budget for this coming year is almost 75% of our expense is employee related. And that's a big number. But we can do better if we measure, monitor, establish performance goals and standards for our staff, and get all 45 of those employees focused on the same goals. The 3 objectives I have for my next term are, I mentioned the process improvement. I want to continue to get the delinquent accounts down to a manageable level. We'll never solve the problem of the little old lady who says, I'm not going to move and I'm not going to pay you a nickel until I die and my heirs will take care of those fees. Not much we can do about that one, but we can protect our property owner association through judgments that'll last over 10 years. We can also solve the problem of the doctor who runs up a $15,000 delinquency, writes us a check, and then starts over and runs it up again. Some challenges to deal with. In conclusion, I'd like to ask you to become informed with real facts and not the nonsense that you read on social media. 3 ways you can do that. Number 1, read my nomination on the website with important details on my background and qualifications. Please view the video of my remarks as well as my peer candidates. It's on the POA website, and it's well worth your time. And then ask yourself, do we really want to start over with newcomers on the board just for the sake of change? Do we really want to step back 26 months while they climb the learning curve? Or should they bring their good ideas forward and participate on like-minded committees to learn how to get good things accomplished for the benefit of this community? My name is Jim Hostetler, and I'd appreciate your vote. Questions? Yes, ma'am. First in line.
You knew you were coming. Elizabeth Woods, I want to ask you questions about something that we really don't talk about much, and that's the reserves. You brought up the reserves. You're information here indicates that you started searching for a company to handle reserves back in 2015, and this hadn't been done. I was a little surprised because I've worked with David Regenbaum before, and reserves were always part of what we did. But my questions are, and I'll tell you what we did. We took that report, which was a lot of fluff.
Is there a question?
I'm getting to it. Did you ever take anything from that reserve study that was originally done in 2016 and incorporate it into capital plans on an annual basis? And why don't, you talk about a reserve.
This year we did. It wasn't,
4 years later?
we didn't have the control of that budget until the beginning of the fiscal year 18-19. Fiscal year 17-18 was developed by the prior developer control board. So last year we took the study done in 2015, we updated it for a 2018 view. We looked out over the 30-year horizon and we realized that a lot of the estimates that the service provider gave us in terms of a plan were grossly overstated. And as a result, we've revised that now. We still look at the 30-year view, but we've got a rolling 5-year view that gives us a much more close-in view and ability to fund long-term and short-term for our actual needs. So we've done a lot of work. We haven't been standing up touting it, but it's not done yet. But it is now reaching a point where we can commit to the policy, and we can commit to the 5-year rolling plan, and we'll continue to add things to the 30-year plan as we're smarter about what's going to happen in the future.
And will that be on the website?
The ultimate, yes, the plans will be on the website. Any questions? Oh, more questions. I'm called, my time's up. Thank you.
Next is Albert Fadul.
You can call me Al. Little Paul Simon song, if you remember that one. I'm going to toot my own horn. I'm going to give you a little bit of my vision, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. I have broad senior management experience in banking, automotive, aerospace, and healthcare. Right now, I'm a Chief Information Security Officer for a startup near Austin. I also own my own company, which is a security consultancy. I moved to Bentwater with my wife in January of 2017. Prior to 2017, I visited Bentwater quite a few times. My brother lives here, and we just fell in love with it. Little story about Bentwater. I was talking to a customer, and we were talking about where do you live and whatnot. I said, I live in Bentwater. And the first thing out of their mouth was, I don't know if I can afford you. I don't know if I can afford you. And I go, yeah, you like Bentwater? He goes, oh, that's lovely. So I, unlike a lot of people have talked about, I haven't heard a bad thing about Bentwater at all. And I deal with a lot of people at the Hess Club in Houston, a lot of different people in petrochemical and whatnot. Never heard a bad thing. Always hear people say, yeah, I went out there and golfed one time. It's a great community. You're lucky. But boy, is that a drive to Houston. And it is. I'm a former hospital CIO. I was a 333-bed hospital in southeastern Michigan. My teams were ranked by industry leaders, best in class for over 8 years in a row. I know how to put together good customer service programs. I know how a hospital runs. I worked for a company that was doing extensive IT outsourcing. And when a hospital was in trouble, they'd contact us and they'd send in Al. And I would go in and I'd reorganize. Now, reorganization, sometimes people think, oh, people lose their jobs and whatnot. And I can tell you that 99% of the people retain their jobs. What we changed was the management. If you look at football teams and baseball teams, what do they change a lot? Coaches, it's managers. You can do a lot with people if you know about people, right? If you know how to manage. Part of what I do is security assessments, right? Security assessments look at the entire organization, all aspects of it, to physical part of it, the technical part of it, and the administrative part of it. And I make an assessment. I've done this for the largest hospital system here in Texas. I've done this for government. I've done it for petrochemical, and I continue to do it. I don't have any children. My wife and I haven't had any. My wife was diagnosed with a very rare form of cancer early on in our marriage. One of 13 people in the world. And it was actually diagnosed by the United States Air Force, believe it or not. My brother-in-law, who lives in Lubbock, was in oncology, and he had the test sent to the Air Force. I was very lucky for that. Anyway, prognosis is great. We've been married 33 years. Well, 32, it'll be 33 in 2 weeks. All right. So, all right, my vision for this organization is basically superior customer service and equal resources to all and transparency. So we talked a little bit about transparency here. I'm a technologist, right? I deal with technology all the time. There's no reason why we can't broadcast this on what's called a conference call, a video conference call. There's no reason why we can't create a library of all of our documents and searchable documents, right? I'd like to see an improvement in our CC&Rs. Right now, if you go online, you look at it kind of sideways and whatnot, you can't search on it, whatever. We need to address that. We need to be able to search it and look at it. I heard today about some really nice things about bringing on new things for the community, emerging, children and whatnot. Community for all, right? Everyone here. The only thing I'm concerned with is when people look at the budget and we look at how we're going to govern things, it's not a big kitty to do special projects for people. I'm not saying what he's saying is a special project. I think we need to serve everyone, but we have to do it according to the rules we all agreed upon, right? The things that we talked about today, the accomplishments of the board, thank you, are only things that we're supposed to do anyway. We're supposed to collect. We're supposed to look at the developer's load. These are things we're supposed to be doing, right? So I'm not going to give you any credit for that. All right? That's what I expect you to do. That's what you expect me to do as your person there. Do I think there's a change needs to be made? Yes, right? Everyone here was rookies when they started, right? I admit to people, great, you went and got some certification and whatnot. My question is, why doesn't the whole board do it, and why don't we pay for it to make sure everyone's educated, not just one person? We should all do it. So with that, I have a lot more to say. If you look on Nextdoor, there's a video that I posted. I also posted the video on Bentwater Live, and I'll probably post another one too because I have more to say. But I'm going to open it up to questions.
Just sit over here. Okay, it's Elizabeth again.
I'm not surprised you're asking a question. Go ahead.
Okay, I want to tell you, one of my concerns is communication.
Yes.
And technology and communication. And right now, if we want to communicate with the board, they ask us to go to the website and use this Contact Us form. And that would work out fine, except I find that I don't always get answers to that. And I don't have confidence that it reaches the entire board. So here's my question. Would you favor us having POA, not individual emails, but POA emails for the board members that homeowners could use? If we want to send an email to the whole board, why can't we do it through official POA emails?
On the surface, I don't see why not. Underneath the surface, what do the CC&R say? What do the regulations say for the board? I have to follow those first. Once I understand what those are, then I can do it. Yes. I think that we should have a more open forum, right? I mean, if you've ever been before a city council, right, you have something that you want to talk about, whatever, it's an open forum, it's recorded, everyone sees it. That's what I would like to see, but that has to go through a change. Are you going to do a change like that? I'm looking to look at the board, make sure, restrict the board to do a few things that are in favor of the community. Not in favor of the board, not in favor of the developer. You gotta remember, when the developer created this place for profit, all the rules were stacked, right? And we have to take a look at this. It's ours now. We have to take a look at those. What can we change that makes it more advantageous to us, not to another person? 2 minutes. We got some more questions. And I have business cards. I'll give you my business card if you want. Just raise your hand, and you can send me email, and I can email you back. Any other questions? No one's sleeping.
Cyber is fun. Cyber is wild. Cyber is intruding in people's lives. Put it out on email, send it. There are people in Bentwater and other neighborhoods that don't get on into all the little things. They're not on Facebook. And then in turn, the communication goes down the drain. I think emails make it simpler rather than always on these other technical things. And you'll get better response for everyone in the neighborhood. Thank you.
I'm on the board for the South Texas Houston.
Katie Tucker.
I'm on the board for the South Texas Houston chapter of the Information System Security Association. I'm the communication director. All right. So what we use is a tool that does mass mailing, right? And inside this tool, you know, we can indicate saying, don't send it to them if they've opened it up or if they clicked on it, right? So, but you send out that message 2 or 3 times to make sure it gets out to your community. We have about 1,000 members, right? So yes, that is important. And thank you for bringing that up, because I'll be doing a cybersecurity awareness seminar for seniors. So I have a nice program put together. I just got to find a way to spend the money to get a hall to do it, right? And then I will be presenting that. It's part of the things that I do that I'm mandated to do as part of my profession. So I'll send that out. Look on Nextdoor for that. If you're not on Nextdoor, I'll give you my card. Any other questions? We're done. So long, thank you.
Next is Gary Island.
Well, good evening, all. It's good to be here and to have a chance to visit with you again. Most of you do not need me to introduce myself, because many of you have probably been in my house. My wife has been very, very gracious to offer our house to having been on the Christmas holiday tour not once but twice since 2009, since we've been in Bentwater. So we have been more proactive than most in encouraging our neighbors to come join us and to enjoy some of the amenities. I want to acknowledge, as Jim indicated, that there are at least 2 incumbents here that have now 26 months of experience being on the POA board. Jim seemed to imply that the others of us were neophytes in that arena. Let me assure you, I am not. If you view my biography that was posted, you'll know that I'm an attorney with 40-plus years of experience representing significant healthcare industry clients from the University of Texas System, MD Anderson Cancer Center, Methodist Hospitals, and others with respect to a large variety of health regulatory issues, business transactions, and the like. Importantly, before we moved to Bentwater, we lived in Tomball, and I was president of the Homeowners Association on the POA there, and we, among other things, worked to upgrade the roads within the subdivision so the main road could be deeded to Harris County to offload 65% of the road maintenance budget to Harris County. Importantly, I am not new to Bentwater. We bought our first lot in Bentwater in 1993. We lived in Tomball, we drove here, pulled our boat, played golf, and raised our children, by and large, on the weekends in this community. We bought our first house in Bentwater in 2009, and then after the infamous drought of 2011, bought a second house that's on the island, so we're a little closer to the water than we were on Creekwood Drive. Nevertheless, I have also was one of the elected officers of your POA Architectural Control Committee 26 months ago. And we were the first Architectural Control Committee that moved from being, again, developer-controlled to property owner-controlled. If you look at my biography, you'll see a couple of the very important developments that we have implemented. One was under the developer control, the Architectural Control Committee met twice a month on the second Tuesday and Thursday of the month. Or excuse me, the second and fourth Tuesday or Thursday of the month. There was an accumulation of all applications that had come to bear in the interim. Those included some significant applications for new home constructions, significant remodeling, and others, but they also included some very basic repainting homes on the exterior with the same color, replacing roofs with the same shingles as before. So we implemented a process for email review of those more simple applications so that they could be approved in the interim and not have a large an agenda when we had our twice-a-month meeting. That has served very well. Let me also say that I suggested, and the Architectural Control Committee agreed, to a very simple process that we used in the Tomball POA. And that is whenever there was an application, a simple question: have you discussed this with your neighbor? It's amazing how many times the answer was no. And so there's also situations where neighbors disagreed with changes that have been made. So we basically now require under the ACC that there be neighbor consultation. Note I say neighbor consultation, not neighbor approval. The neighbor doesn't approve the applications. That's the ACC approves applications. But we do have the situation required neighbor consultation and reporting what the neighbors have said. Most of the time, the neighbors are in total agreement with any enhancement in the property next door to them. Occasionally, that will not be the case, but the neighbor discussion usually has now resolved that. Also, in addition to being on the ACC, I mentioned that in 2013, we moved over to Benhaven Island. There is what I will call a mini POA. I'm not sure whether many of you are aware that there are more than one POA in Bentwater. And the ones that really are most significant are the large island, the Benhaven Island Association, and also the small island, both have POAs. Mr. Beelan, the developer, did offload some significant maintenance obligations to each of those mini POAs. I was asked to work with the board of the Benhaven Island POA for two major projects this year. One was to upgrade, to partially replace and repair the bulkheads at the entrance to both sides of the bridge to Benhaven Island. The other was to assess the bridge expansion joints, and ultimately we decided we needed to replace the expansion joints. And so I worked to get bids for both of those, and those projects were carried to fruition. I might just note in mentioning expansion joints, also at my house I had to have driveway raised where it was sinking. Also needed new expansion joints there, so I decided to replace those with the same type of compound that they used expansion joints and bridges and the like. And also, if you were here on Saturday or reviewed the video, there was discussions of the black rubberized crack repairs that we have on the roads. The good contractor I dealt with suggested in my driveway for expansion joints to use the gray color, not the black, because it was, in his view, not quite as noticeable. So I did pay more for the gray color expansion joints. I can tell you now, 6 months into it, that they are now covered with black algae. I would say probably the most noticeable thing is there is a total lack of uniformity in color. It's not just one black, one gray, but multi-colors on those expansion joints. Now, having grown up, having been raised in Harris County and Montgomery County, I can also tell you that for my entire life, I have seen black repairs of cracks in asphalt roads, concrete roads, and the like. We certainly might wish we had something else here, but that has already begun to be recognized and saving significant dollars. I might mention one last item. I did decide not to stand for re-election to the ACC this year, with the intent to stand for election to the POA board. So I do ask your support in that transition. But one of the last items that we focused on at the ACC during my tenure was further discussion of an item that's already underway at the POA, and that is dealing with the curbs situation. There are some deterioration in the curbs at various locations, and one of those is kind of half and half responsibilities. The ACC needs to deal with that and is now dealing with it on a prospective basis for new applications. We have made some significant improvements to ensure that those curbs will be properly installed and not deteriorate over time. The POA is already working, and within their reserves and their budget, they have set aside monies to begin to do some of the repairs on curbs elsewhere within the community. But frankly, on some of the roadways excess, they should be property owner responsibilities for some of that. But nevertheless, we're making good progress trying to improve the appearance of the POA. And in what I posted on Bentwater Live, I said my objectives are really to preserve, protect, and enhance the property values and amenities within Bentwater. We have grown to love those amenities since 1993, and we look forward to working for you to ensure that that continues. Let me pause for a question or two before my time's over.
Okay, I want to ask you a question that more has to do with the future than the past, but I'm asking it because of your past POA experience. One of my concerns here is that our financial reports do not give us anything other than cost center reports. Do you believe it would be beneficial to the board as a management agent, for the money, and to the homeowners if we had a monthly financial report for income and expenses that contained all of the POA and not just each department? I'm talking about a monthly report. Right now we get monthly financial reports, and they are by cost center. They are not the total of the POA.
Well, again, the POA has multiple cost centers and would be likely needing to have that type of information. I am not as familiar with the Bentwater POA. I can speak to the Benthaven Island Association mini POA because we do receive monthly financial reports. And it goes through clearly within the various areas of our responsibility, show kind of what the budgets are, compare the year-to-date expenditures, and make sure that we understand what is left for the remainder of the year and what types of responsibilities we have.
Okay, but we do not presently get that it totals the POA. We just get cost centers. So if you're looking at the top down as a trustee, would that be beneficial to you to be able to see how the total POA is?
I would need to see what the board is actually receiving. I would be extremely surprised if it was as simplistic as you described.
It is.
Next is Cam Cope.
Thank you, and I'm glad to be here tonight, but I appreciate really all of the individuals that have come by. I appreciate the people who have been on the board or are currently on the board, people who have taken their time to be here. I don't know about the diversity question. I think I'm about as diversity as anybody I know. But anyway, I live here in Bentwater. I live on Promenade, and I have been for 5 or 6 years, I guess it is, in the Estates. I go to North Shore Church as well as a couple of other churches, and I also belong to a business men's meeting that's on Wednesday night. Looking forward to having more men there. But that's how somebody's always asking, why are you here? Our newest series, 33 for men, said that in one of the sessions you need to use your skills to bless the community. And whenever I came up with that, it came to me to volunteer and see what else I could begin to do with Bentwater. I have lived in Bender's Landing. I've lived in the Woodlands area. Our office facility is Auto Fire and Safety Corporation. I own that facility. We're in the Woodlands area. I have 38 acres there. I have 30,000 square foot of buildings and offices. I have employees that deal with my aspect of kind of engineering, forensic engineering. But we've also lived there in the Woodlands. One of my daughters is the event coordinator there in the Woodlands, so I get a chance to see what other communities are doing and how they can benefit. And some of it's through accidents, some of it's through litigation. But this is what I primarily do. I'm pretty much a person who is hired by the major law firms throughout the United States. I travel, lecture with regards to how do you get people to work together. And that's where I really probably am focused, and that's why they pay me what they do in order to get people to work together. And in most of mine, I would say that it is probably the for-profit corporations and the individuals, the consumer and or the resident. So that's where my specialty is how do you get that to work together? How do you convince? And I know the last Saturday somebody said you don't use the word force. That's a bad word. You use the word convince. But in my times, I think I've testified, they said over 300 times, a lot of it against General Motors, Ford. But it was convincing them that you can't strap the fuel tank to the rear bumper of a Ford Mustang. And you're convincing them that it being the #1 fatality car in America, that there's a way to move it around. That's my job, is to work with the lawyers, the consumers, to try to pull things together. There's no real, as he's saying, he's got 2 years of experience in doing this, but in all accidents or in all of the various issues from time to time, it's a whole new problem every time. So we're having to research everything. It's kind of like the black rubber that's spaghetti that's on the roadway. We have to work towards what is it that it'll work. And as Gary said, the gray that he used didn't work. I've been around a long time on it. There are products that will work, and they are something that is to our advantage. And so my skills, education, training are in the profession of convincing or working with for-profit organizations. And that's what I like doing. I'm challenged by it. I'm creative. I think that most lawyers will tell you I'm the most creative person they've ever hired. And so I think that in order to be positive about this community, putting your heart into it, is how do I do that? You know, and I think a lot of times we don't really define the problem. We have people that say, I would like to have something other than black rubber put on the roadway. It's a matter of now how we define that problem, how we collect the data, how we get the information that we can use to make it a better product, make it more presentable. How do we get it to where it is going to benefit not only the for-profit portion of this community, but for us, the resident? They both have to benefit. And I think that it's not easy to get that done. But I think a lot of people don't realize that there are the for-profit organization that's here, and there is the residents. And so you have some that would say, I don't mind that the pool's green. I've heard that. And you have say, well, you can't really convert or convince the for-profit that blue water's better. And so how do you go about trying to figure out how is it that we can come to some terms that are beneficial for the for-profit organization and economically and technology-wise, how do we get that where we can say, if it's green water, for example, then so be it. If that's approved by the health department, then we should use the green water. But if it's blue water, then how do we work together to convince them that blue water is better than green water? I'm just picking one example because I think it's being able to convince, and not only the for-profit organization, but this board. How do we get 5 people to work together? That's my job. That's what I do. That's the diversity that I do that is probably not mentioned here. It's a task to get the board members to agree and for us to work with the for-profit part of this development. It has a lot of capabilities. And we have some of the finest people that I've met here at Bentwater, professionals. And I know a lot of them, whether it's with the FBI, the CIA. These individuals are here. They're very knowledgeable. They're professors, they're engineers, they're doctors, they're lawyers. These are the people that you have to, as a mediator like me, you've got to be able to focus those people. You've got to get their ideas, and you've got to convey that to this board that's here to say, we want to work together, and that's our goal. I don't know. We have a question or two. I'm sure that I didn't go over all of my points.
Patty Santowski. Cam, I think my biggest concern is transparency and understanding what the board's working on. And what we've been told both Saturday and today is that's not going to happen. We're not going to know about it until it's a done deal, until they've made the decision. I'm not comfortable with that. How would you propose to have more transparency so people know what's going on?
I think you have to be honest. I think you have to work with them. I think you have to feel that you can call me and you can talk to me about it. I think that's important because you certainly have ideas and you have good questions. And so it has to be somebody's goal in there to pull your ideas forward. And how do we then distribute them to the rest of the board, to the other people to find out, you know, you like the blue water or you like the green water. Unless I know, you have to be able to tell me about it and come up with defining the problem. And we have to write that out in paper so that we've got it in one form to be able to do that. I know, this is diversity. Okay, go ahead.
Just wondered if you could speak to us a little bit about your heritage and your beautiful finish that you're wearing.
My father was a World War II veteran, hero, and I have to catch up. The Indians were brought back from Iwo Jima and put into New Mexico. And while in New Mexico, they had no education. My dad had a 3rd grade education. And so they were put in there, and that's where they were taught silver, gold, not much gold, but leather works, and he was a superior craftsman. He was a silversmith beyond anybody I've ever known. And so that was that heritage. I was pretty much raised by the Indians there. And so that's part of it. But the bear is, to be real brief, the bear is a spirit bear. So at that time, it wasn't really a thing about God. It was about the spirit, and the bear was the spirit. And the elk's tooth, that's the most ornamental item for females in getting wedding dresses. You see all the white beads, those are all elk's teeth. They're ivory. They're one of 3 mammals that have ivory in their body. And you use that because it's a spiritual item, so I still have my dad's heritage in it. So uneducated, but very, it helped me, I think, in Vietnam, because he was telling me that, you know, you have the spirits there with you, and they're going to fly past bullets because the spirits are faster than bullets. And so he was right.
Thank you all very much for your attendance tonight. If you want to stop up here and talk after the meeting for a little bit, we have the room for a little while longer. Please let me remind you that tomorrow night at 7 o'clock in this room, there is an open board meeting. Please try to attend. You may get some information that will benefit you. Thank you again. Good night.